Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia. Now the show has two very distinct types of episodes. The first are our deep dive interviews with leading guitarists and guitar figures from all around the world. And the other type of show I produce is the Iconic Albums series. And for that I am joined by my friends Rob Rhodes and Gabor Josika, two professional musicians that are just a great hang, and we talk about some of the most influential guitar records in our collection. Today's episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott, the ex-head of guitar at the world-famous Guitar Institute of Technology in LA and the McNally Smith College of Music. Not only is Joe a world-class educator, he is a fantastic guitar player. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
If you're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player, Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
All right, welcome to Iconic Albums number 16. I'm joined by my friends Rob Rhodes.
Hello.
And Gabor Josika.
Hello.
Was there mic bleed there or what?
Well, this is great. Well, I'll explain the play date in a moment. But
Yes.
This is the show where Rob and Gabor and I, we talk about some of the most influential guitar records in our collection. It's a roundtable conversation. And for the people at home, Rob and Gabor are having an Iconic Albums play date.
Yes.
Rob has found himself stuck over the Queensland border, which is where Gabor lives, and they are recording in the same room in Gabor's studio, which is super cool.
I know.
Yeah, it's very different.
Three-dimensional version of Rob. It's crazy.
Somehow,
I love it.
Somehow still only two-dimensional.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. But
I wish I was there. I guess for our overseas listeners, the three of us are in two different states, and with the current COVID restrictions, there's a little bit of trickery involved in the borders of the states. Hey, tonight's album is a ripper. Rob, you chose this one. How about you kick us off?
Yeah, I thought it is the 1-year anniversary of the passing of King Edward Van Halen, of course. So I really wanted to pay tribute to that anniversary and hopefully do it justice to all the Van Halen fans out there. And it was a struggle because there's so many albums. Of course, there's people that could argue we should pick the first album, but from a guitar point of view and a fan favorite, I went with Fair Warning, which is their fourth album, released on April 29, 1981. Ooh, I was just turned 5 around that time. Wow. It has sold more than 2 million copies, but was still the band's slowest selling album of the David Lee Roth era. Despite the album's commercial disappointment, early on anyway, Fair Warning met with mostly positive reviews. The album is listed by Esquire as one of the 75 albums every man should own, but I want to add that every woman should own it too.
Yeah, women and children first, yeah. I would say.
All the rockers. It was recorded at LA's iconic Sunset Sound, where Van Halen albums were all recorded up until 1984. And it was recorded there's conflicting things. It says between early March and early April, but I've also read that it was done in 11 days.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So produced once again by Ted Templeman and engineered by Don Landy, released on Warner Brothers. So yeah, this is my favorite Van Halen record because essentially this is where Eddie got to flex his creative muscle, where he started to take control of the sound of the band, the direction of the band, and this was the result. So yeah, it's a much darker record, less of a party album than the earlier Van Halen records. and because he was sort of in a strange place, Eddie. He was very angry. He was going to get married to Valerie at the time, and he'd overheard David Lee Roth speaking kind of derogatory about the whole situation, saying, first he's the guy everyone wants to talk to. He's the guitar hero, and he's the first to marry a Hollywood actress. Right. And so Roth was a very interesting sort of individual, but also Eddie had felt like his creativity was being suppressed by Templeman and Roth at this time. So there was a lot of tension, and that came out in the music. So that's kind of like a quick wrap up of the album. And what did you think, Matt, on listen?
So for me, Van Halen, when this album came out, I think I must have been 9, so well before guitar, well before really getting into music, I think. But I think I started hearing Van Halen probably when 5150 came out. So that was obviously Sammy's first record. So that's when I first really noticed Van Halen. I mean, I'd obviously heard Jump on the radio in the previous couple of years. I didn't hear Eruption until probably 1986 when some musician friends of mine showed me. And I remember thinking, is that a guitar? Like a lot of people thought when they heard the tapping for the first time. So yeah, all those kind of groundbreaking, brain-exploding moments that I think most guitar players had. I had them as well. But then I ended up working backwards. I guess like, a lot of people do when you hear a new artist or someone that's new to you. So I didn't hear this album till much later. So after the Sammy stuff, I went back, through Van Halen 1 and worked my way through. But yeah, Fair Warning's a great record. I think you described it well, saying it was a dark record that left some of the party band stuff behind. Lots of my guests on the podcast too will say Fair Warning is their favourite. Yeah,
it seems to be a guitar player favourite. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And the production's awesome, and it's a really interesting time, 81, because Van Halen, they're not brand new. Like you said, it's their 4th record. But there's still a lot of fire going on, and as you said, Eddie was really grabbing a hold of the reins.
Yeah, and he kind of paid for it with the next record because he had to give up all control of Diver Down, and it had half covers like, Pretty Woman and Dancing in the Street and all of that. So he kind of knew he had to give a bit after this one, and the result was Diver Down. But I was the same as you. I think I got 5150 first because a friend just gave it to me because they all of a sudden overnight weren't into guitar anymore and was listening to NWA and Public Enemy and all this stuff. And so he went, I don't like this anymore. Do you want it? And 5150 was the first album that was handed to me. And then my best mate's brother a couple of years later with For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And then I worked backwards from there. So
okay. Yeah.
How about you, Gabor? What was your thoughts on this record?
81, in April 81, I was still 2. So massive Van Halen fan at the time.
Did you like the record? Did you like it more than the third one?
No, so I was still 2. I turned 3 later in the year. Okay, so remember how a few weeks ago I was being almost kicked out of Australia for the whole chisel thing? I think I'm now going to get kicked out of the guitar playing community. So this is first time ever I listened to an entire Van Halen album start to finish.
Wow.
First time ever.
You're welcome.
Well, we haven't.
Hold it.
The problem is with Rob being here now.
Rob is about to kick you out of your studio. This is going to be weird.
I know, that's going to be rather bizarre. So I'm going to get beaten up. So if I disappear mysteriously, people, help me. But no.
Gabor's bigger than me, by the way.
Yeah.
Just want to say
that. Just taller. That's a high center of gravity. I go down really easily. But anyway. So my first ever time that I've listened to an entire Van Halen album, I don't know, I never... And don't mean that in a bad way at all, but I never quite got the whole Van Halen thing personally. And I have to say, listening to the album, I still don't necessarily get it. But that's just me. I totally get his impact, and I totally get why, he is this legendary figure, and I totally get that. I don't mean it in that way. But I mean, for me personally, it's just not my thing. But at the same time, the things I wrote down, right? So for this album, great guitar tone. I totally give him that. And I think for the time, for 81, I think there weren't many other guitar players that had quite that sort of saturated and thick, full guitar sound that wasn't really around then. So totally see that. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, guitar playing world. Please send your hate mail to PO Box 175. No, I mean, there were moments on there that I liked, but I don't know. Yeah. Back to Rob.
We're all, hey, that's why we're here. We don't want everyone to have the same opinion, so it's good.
Yeah, I like it, Gabor. Like that. Yeah, you've got these left field.
I'm the oddball. Yeah, I definitely am the oddball.
Yeah, it's good.
Wait till I bring an oddball record, then you're all going to be. Anyway, so from this record, there apparently was a music video made, but it never saw the light of day. Okay. But there were live videos released from the classic Oakland Coliseum show, which was a 3-night stint between. Oh, now this is going to be the other way around, isn't it? The 11th of June 81 and the 13th of June 81. And so there's live videos out there of Unchained, So This Is Love, and Hear About It Later. They're so good. And those videos debuted on an episode of Don Kirshner's Rock Concert Series, which was a television program. Fans have always wondered if the whole concert exists, but apparently it doesn't. They only recorded the first 4 or 5 songs from that show.
I think I watched those, the ones you were just talking about, on YouTube when I went through the album. I think I saw them because there was some really old footage.
Yeah.
And I think it was that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's killer. Like some of just what he could do live is just crazy good.
The kicks.
Yeah, the high kicks. Yeah, love the high kicks. So this was the first Van Halen record that was really heavy on overdubs. All the other records only had 1 or 2 overdubs per record.
Oh, okay.
It was basically recorded live, and that was where a lot of the tension came from because Templeman and Roth wanted to keep that live band vibe that they had on the last 3 records. But Eddie just fought tooth and nail to the point where he would hate everything they recorded during the day, and he would call Don Landy and say, meet me back at the studio at 4 a.m. and go in and re-record everything. So he'd just delete everything and re-record exactly the way that he wanted. Oh. There was one instance where he was recording a guitar solo and Ted went, nah, do it again. And he did it like 20 times. And Ted's like, well, tell me what you want. Like, you keep saying it's not right. Give me an idea of what you think it needs. And Ted's like, oh, don't worry, let's move on. And then Eddie came back at 4 o'clock in the morning that night and recorded the exact same solo he did 20 times before. And the next day when Ted came in, he went, wow, that's perfect, mate. Like, absolutely perfect. So it was just, I think there was a real power struggle going on. And you can see that this was the birth of Eddie. I think the inkling that he had to build 5150, which was his home studio, that he built. Yeah. And I think that cemented in his mind after Diver Down. Because a lot of his great ideas, especially his little synth hook ideas, were stolen and used for songs like Dancing in the Street. And originals were given way to recording covers of things like Oh Pretty Woman and, you know, Where Have All the Good Times Gone? You know, that's a great song. But so Sinner's Swing is the only live solo on the whole record.
Oh, wow.
Every other one is overdubbed.
That's a killer solo, far out.
Yeah. So
actually, funny. The first thing I wrote down reminds me of Satch Boogie.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
because they're all sort of influenced that ZZ Top influence. You know, it's that high energy boogie thing going on.
Yeah. There's a few of them on this record.
Yeah. It's just anyway. There's so much going on with that record. Favorite songs, Matt?
There was a few. I really like this record. Unchained is awesome.
Yeah, the drop D thing.
Yeah, it's cool. And
Like, it wasn't the first time it had ever been done, but I know, like, for 81, drop D was something very unusual.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, it would have been, yeah.
Which is a great tune. Mean Street's awesome. The opening, that tapping, slapping stuff, that's a cool way to open the record.
That's amazing.
I wrote down, it reminded my dad back in the days used to have an old telex machine. Mm-hmm. Do you remember?
Yeah.
There's probably some kids out there that don't, but this is back in the days before, like, computers, and then there were fax machines, but before that there was a telex machine.
Yes.
And it had these long strips. And when it first started, it for some reason sparked this little memory of the sound my dad's old telex machine made. Right at the start, the first few really metallic-y sort of sounding sounds. Sorry, it was funny. It just really sparked. You know how sometimes you hear something and it puts you in a place?
Yeah,
that really did. It just kind of went, oh, wow. This is like in my dad's old office. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
I mean, any kids hearing or seeing that today, they think, hang on, don't acoustic guitar players do that stuff? All that percussive stuff. But he's doing it with that really high gain tone, and it's amazing. It's really cool. And the song itself is really cool. That's a cool moment. Man, there's so much pedal point on this album. I know it's a bit of a Van Halen thing, but Michael Anthony, the amount of times he's just playing one note,
dum, 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 dum.
And Eddie's just, riffing out over the top of it. It sounds cool. I think that brings some of the darkness.
It's also questionable how much bass Mike actually played on the album. Like, it's come out in recent times that, Eddie was there at 4 a.m, so he's doing overdubs, that it's quite possible that when he changed a part that he just laid the bass down himself. So, yeah.
I was sort of wondering, because I had read that, Eddie played some bass on some stuff, and there's one tune in particular that doesn't strike me as particularly Michael Anthony, and that's Push Comes to Shove.
The bass intro, I wrote that down actually as one thing. I like it, and it sounds very different to everything else.
Yeah. It sounds reminded me of Miss You by the Stones, that kind of almost soulful.
There's a quote on that song where Eddie said Dave wanted to get this kind of reggae rock ska thing going on, which was and that's what Eddie came up with to follow that directive. And kind of like a prelude to the things that happened later on towards the late 80s.
Yeah, right. Wow. Cool, man. That had some really cool clean sounds as well, some really hi-fi, almost clean guitars, which is not usually Van Halen. No. Eddie's like the master of rolling back the volume and just cleaning up that way, which I really dig. So, yeah, they were some of my favourite tracks. Dirty Movies, Eddie's playing slide on that, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote, is that slide guitar? Because he's not known to play slide, or I don't.
No, the odd song over the years he's done some slide parts, but yeah, it's not a huge part of his playing.
Sure.
And I got a little story about that as when we get into the gear part.
Yeah. Well, man, there's a lot of flanger and phaser, so I guess we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But there's some really cool. I mean, the Unchained flange is kind of an iconic moment in rock and roll flange history.
For sure.
So that's kind of fun. But yeah, they were probably my standouts. The whole band sounds great. It's an interesting period in the band's history, like you said, and I think it's reflected in the music.
All right, so this should be pretty quick then.
No. Actually, one of the things, because you guys were talking about bass, one of the things I wrote down is I never realized how kind of dominant the bass is in Van Halen. It seemed in a lot of songs quite dominant.
I think on this record it is, whereas on previous records
it wasn't. It
was kind of buried.
Oh, okay.
It kind of has that thing where Eddie was in the left speaker and the Echoplex was in the right. And the bass, like it's all about drums and guitar, and the bass is just sort of in the background.
Because I never quite realised, but there was quite a few songs where, like Matt was saying, sort of that eighth note, like bass sits on one chord or one note with all the other stuff going on over it. But yeah, I never quite realised how dominant it was. So for me, I didn't dislike the album. It just Anyway, so Mean Street is one that I wrote down. Like I said, reminded me of the old Telex machine, the metallic sound. Great guitar sound. Dirty Movies, slide guitar. Hear About It Later. The intro, it's a really nice chord progression.
Yeah.
And then I really like there's a change a little bit before the solo. It's like a real change in the song. And it's just that I really like that change. And then after the solo, it kind of goes back to the song again. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like a whole shift in the song, which I really liked. Unchained, the flanger thing. Push Comes to Shove, great bass intro. And I kind of liked, and again, this is not Van Halen, but I liked how it was a bit more melodic and less shreddy.
Yeah.
That's just me. Sunday Afternoon in a Park, I quite liked the synth sound and the sound of the drums, just the tone of it. And I think there's no guitar in this one at all. So.
No, there isn't. But that's okay.
But
that's
I quite like just the sound of it, just the sound of the synth and the drums. Because the drums sounded a bit distorted as well, and it sounded a cool sound. And then One Foot Out the Door, is that synth or bass, the riff?
No, it's the synth as well.
Is it the synth?
Yeah, because it's kind of like two songs that kind of leads
interlink,
into...
Yeah. And I like that. I like that sound of it. But that was my... like I said, I didn't dislike it. It wasn't like, I'm not allergic to Eddie like I am to Barnsey, but...
Dig up, stupid. Simpsons reference.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my favourite tracks.
Cool. Well, for me, I'm going to agree with Gabor here because Push Comes to Shove is my number one... favorite Eddie Van Halen solo.
Okay.
And it's
so nice and melodic. It's really nice.
Yeah, and it's almost close to my number one song of theirs too, like my most favorite song. If, I pick a Van Halen song to listen to, I almost go to that song every time.
Okay.
Wow, cool.
And then So This Is Love is probably my number 2 favorite solo, and it's my favorite Van Halen song. Like, when I go, it depends on my mood. Most of the time, it's So This Is Love, and then when it's not that, it's Push Comes to Shove. So Mean Street is just a quintessential, gnarly pocket riff of all the Eddie goodness. And the intro we talked about, just jump on, people listening, if you haven't seen how he does it, if you're listening to it, as an accompaniment to this podcast, go and watch him do it live because it's the only way it makes sense. He's tapping the low E on the 12th fret with his thumb, and he's tapping the high E and B with his first finger on the 12th fret as well. And he's just creating that palm mute thing with his left hand. It just becomes this, it's great.
Okay.
So it's not as, these days, as you said, Matt, you see a lot of acoustic players doing it now. Hitting those harmonics and stuff around the neck and making it a rhythmic thing. But Hear About It Later is just so lush, from the intro riff to the descending, pattern in the verses, and it's just beautiful, And Unchained is just beastly in the best way. Yeah, it's just, you just want to play that riff all day. But one thing I thought about was if I was putting a Van Halen mixtape together for someone like Gabor, tracks 1 to 7 would be on it. So I'm totally in the Van Halen camp on this one and this record. And I like the other two as well. I like Sunday Afternoon in the Park and One Foot Out the Door. I think it's, when you're a Van Halen fan, you get why Eddie was doing that. The keyboards are in on Women and Children First. The intro to, the main riff of And the Cradle Will Rock is not a guitar. It's actually a Wurlitzer or something from memory, I think, into his Marshall stacks.
Hey? Yeah, cool.
So
cool.
The keyboards have been around a long time, and I do like, it is aggressive, and I like listening to Alex play, and he gets his place there. So it works really well. I think pretty much the whole album's my favourite song. We might take a break and then we'll come back and talk gear and a few fun facts.
This episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott, ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and the McNally Smith College of Music. I was one of the beta testers for the course and can say as a music educator, I was really impressed by the logical sequence of learning. The course has also been endorsed by players such as Brett Garsed and Greg Koch. For more details, check out the links in our show notes. All right, welcome back to Iconic Albums number 16. We're talking about Fair Warning, Van Halen's fourth album, and Rob has brought this record along for us tonight.
Yeah, so I thought we might get into the gear. It's really easy with Eddie. You do have to traverse a lot of his lies because from one interview to the next, he'll just totally throw something else completely the opposite of what he said in the last thing. Because he's very secretive, even from the early days where I think David Lee Roth actually told him to face his back to the audience until they were signed, because he didn't want the LA scene and all those cats coming in
know what he was doing.
To see what he was doing. So he spent that early years at the Whiskey and Gazzari's and all of those places facing his amp and his back to the audience when he played. So, he was very protective, even as recently as when he did the Smithsonian interview, which you can find on YouTube. It's great. That's actually really cool, fessed up about how he used the Variac. He used to tell everyone he turned it up, but he never turned it up. He turned it down. And a lot of the times he was just using it because the clubs had fluctuating power and he knew what the Marshall wanted. So he just would feed the Marshall the exact amount of wattage that it needed. So sometimes he did crank it up a little bit. Other times he turned it down. But he especially turned it down because he couldn't play a 100-watt Marshall for 5 hours in these clubs. So he used it as an attenuator, basically. But in saying all that, the majority of the album is on his original Franken Strat that he built. But at that time, he had repainted it, that red and white and black, the iconic Frankenstein guitar that has recently been reissued.
With the reflectors on the back.
See,
I know something about that
Yeah.
now.
Rob, is that the same guitar that's on the cover of Van Halen 1, the yellow and black one?
Yeah. So that's the one that was... Well, no, the yellow and black one's on Van Halen 2. It's the white and black one on Van Halen 1.
Sorry, yes.
So, it's the white and black one, the boogie body with the neck and the Gibson Path in the bridge.
Okay.
And there was 2 tracks he used a Strat on, and it was a mahogany-bodied Strat.
Wow.
So that's Hear About It Later and Push Comes to Shove. So where you hear the clean bits, that
sounds very like Stratty. I was going to say it does sound like the in-between position.
Now, he does use the slide, as we spoke about on Dirty Movies. Again, a rarity in his career. Women and Children First, on Could This Be Magic? He does the slide on the acoustic guitar on that track. So I think that's I could be wrong, but just from memory, that's the first sort of slide showing up for Eddie. And then later, the Apolitical Blues on OU812, and there's little bits of slide all over the place. And Van Halen 3, there's some on there as well. Oh, no, I mentioned Van Halen 3. Oh, anyway, that's next week's Iconic album, folks. But for the slide guitar and Dirty Movies, all those high parts, Eddie really struggled to reach them. He couldn't get the high fret access, which is weird because as an SG, you would think that's the easiest kind of one to get the high. But anyway, he struggled with it. So he actually took to it with a saw and hacked a big gash into the S. Jesus. It was an LP, as an SG shaped LP Junior.
Okay.
Right. So that's what he did. He just hacked into the bottom bout so he could quite easily just reach that guitar gone. And again, he has the history of that. He took the Destroyer and took a chainsaw to the back of it.
He destroyed.
He did destroy the destroyer.
He destroyed the destroyer.
And he said he did. He said as soon as I did that, all the tone went because that tone bass is right behind the bridge, and he hacked right into that. Yeah. So Sunday afternoon in the park, as we mentioned, is all synthesizer, and that was played on an EHX micro synth.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So he got all that sort of stuff out of that, and you can see some live. The footage is horrible, but it was in the live show. So he would go, him and Alex would do that as a solo section, and Eddie had the microsynth up there, and then they'd go into Romeo's Delight out of that song in that 81 set list. All of the whammy is basically done. He put the original Fender tremolo back on with a brass nut that he used to oil. So he said in the studio, he didn't use the Floyd Roses at that point because it was hard for him to tune them. It was just so much easier with a Fender, how he had them set up. Right, so in a lot of interviews, he talks about how he set up those Fender tremolos to keep them in tune for long periods of time when he was dive bombing. So he would wind the string up the tuning peg.
Oh, I think I've seen that somewhere.
Yeah. So the string pull was a lot straighter because he didn't want it breaking over the
break
neck.
Angle.
Over the nut. So he would wind it up, but he said a lot of the times you had to adjust how you would play because the strings would just come out of the nut slots.
Yeah.
So he did that. But this is how fastidious and insane he was about keeping it in tune. He worked out that when you turn the tuning peg, that the string would coil up. So when it locks in, as it's turning, it's spinning on its axis, right? But it would stay and just coil like a hose, basically. So he would sit at the other end, and every couple of winds, he would grab the ball end of the string and turn it the opposite way. The string would stay, it wouldn't twist as you were turning it around the tuning peg.
Far out.
So all these little things that he used to do, so good, you know.
I never ever even thought about that. Yeah. That spins. Yeah, I guess it makes sense, yeah.
And that's why he's been such a pioneer when it's come to guitar design. Like the original Floyd Rose didn't have the microtuners, and he gave Floyd the idea of the microtuner. Wow. And Floyd said, "Oh yeah, no worries. I'll put you on the, I'll put you on the patent." And he would send him, "Oh, does this work? Does this work?" And he was going through all the prototypes, and in the end, like Floyd Rose screwed him on it, and he got no money out of it. No. Wow. Which is why he became so protective.
With all the EVH gear at the end.
With all these little gadgets and his names and patents and stuff down the track. So most of the album is a 67, 68 Marshall Super Lead, which is his Holy Grail amp. That's the one, that he used on everything. And there was talk. I went through a whole lot of interviews, but I could never find out what it was. But there was some things that came out. I think maybe Don Landy spoke about there was some smaller little combo amps used. And that's why the sound is a little bit different than on some of those other records.
Okay.
So he's pushing them to their limit. And then there's the usual MXR pedals, the Phase 90, the flanger, and the MXR chorus.
Yep. And
his famed Echoplex, which he used as a preamp, as well as, his effects. Did you guys come across anything or wanted to add or had some questions that maybe I can answer off the top of my head?
Yeah, kind of. I think similar to a couple of weeks ago, I was sort of aware of the guitars from this era, but always interested because this is pre-Kramer and obviously pre-PV and then the EVH stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I guess all those hacked up strats they are just so cool. I had there was a mate I used to sit next to in high school in year 11 and 12, and he had a picture of Eddie. I think it was a Kramer ad. Yeah. But it had his original, or one of the originals, but it had the Kramer neck on it because he went through a few necks. And it was just the coolest guitar ever. Had the red single coil in the neck that wasn't connected. I think it had a 5-way switch in the middle.
Just sitting in the cavity.
Yeah, just sitting there, just to look cool.
Yeah.
Man.
There's a video. I remember watching it last year sometime, and it's Eddie Van Halen going through his studio, and there's all these guitar bodies sitting around, and he goes, I just took some tests on this and some tests on that, and all these bits and pieces floating around and different necks from different guitars. It was really cool actually to see that. I mean, like I said, I totally get, what he's done and, the whole history of and what he did. And I mean, amazing innovator, because I mean, he was the first guy to wax pickups too, wasn't he? To make him.
I think they were wax potted, like you could get wax potted pickups, but he was wax potting and destroying like original Gibson Paps. He said he melted so many of them that collectors would be crying today because he was just experimenting. He went
seeing what worked,
trying to get the temperature of the wax right, and he said he'd drop a pickup in and the plastic would melt and it'd be ruined, And he just bought Gibsons that weren't all that expensive back then and just ripped the pickup out and left the guitar.
Oh, yeah.
There was some talk that there was a Les Paul at that time that Eddie is photographed with playing live. Yeah. It might have been on the Women and Children First tour that appears on this album too, but it was just kind of like hearsay, and there was a couple of photos from 81 with him in the studio, and there's a Gibson double neck here and a couple of weird and wacky. Maybe even one of those aluminium necked Kramers was in the photo too, but no one can really confirm. Only really Don Landy was in a lot of those sessions, and the man himself, what he has said. But I'm sure there's the odd thing that turned up on a part where he wanted a thicker sound, and that's where he just pulled out the Les Paul and used it on that.
I remember watching the Sunset Sound Studio has its own YouTube channel, and they did a lot of stuff about Prince, but they also did a lot of stuff about Van Halen, and it was one of those round tables with Dweezil Zappa, and I think Don Landy. Was Don Landy? Or maybe someone else.
No, I think it was Greg Renoff, the guy that wrote the latest Van Halen book that came out.
But I remember Dweezil was doing exactly. He was saying, so what guitar? What was this? Because Dweezil, I think, is a massive Van Halen fan.
And Friends, because Van Halen actually produced Dweezil's first solo record.
And he came over. I remember watching. There's a story. I think it's on the Gibson when a Gibson YouTube channel when Dweezil goes through his guitar collection. Which is insane. But I think he was saying he played with his band. He played a Van Halen song at his school band competition or something like that. And his dad Frank got Eddie to come along or something like that.
Okay, I don't
maybe, or there was something like that. And then the next day he showed up at his house and he gave Dweezil a guitar or something like that.
Yeah, the Rasta Strat.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and it was just him going. This is like the biggest rock star in the world. And he comes to my school, and it's like all the other kids were like, "Wow, you're so cool." And I mean, you are Frank Zappa's son on top of that. But anyway,
But just the craziness, like you look at the inventors over the years, and you've had Leo Fender, who wasn't a guitar player, and all the things that he pioneered, and then Les Paul pioneering all the things he did, like multi-tracks, and he was. You could argue he was the first looping guitar player. Because he was just looping things on tape and playing, and
massive cupboard-sized looping machines.
There's some players out there with some pretty big looping setups.
True.
But right through all those things to building his own, and now the EVH brand, because as I mentioned, not only did he not get ripped off by Floyd Rose, but he got ripped off by DiMarzio as well, who designed the pickups for Music Man with Ed, and they promised him, that he would have ownership of those, and they screwed him in the fine print on those too. So he ended up not owning anything on the Music Man either. And then that's when he went, well, PV have been good to me with the 5150 line, so I'm going over there and I'm going to make the Wolfgang, and his name was on all the patents of everything that went through.
Okay.
It's just the amount of times that's happened to him, you could see why he was just done and wanted to protect his name.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we can do some fun facts.
Yeah, man.
Fun facts with Rob.
That's me. So Unchained and Hear About It Later were originally written on piano. So in that interview you talked about with Dweezil Zappa, he talks about Eddie showing him or seeing Eddie playing those songs on piano.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Now that you're saying that, I remember that, yeah.
So I'd already mentioned that Ed didn't like the way things were going in the studio, and yeah, he would grab Don Landy and get back in. Sunday Afternoon in the Park became part of Mike's bass solo on the 91-92 Right Here, Right Now tour.
Okay.
And continued on. I think Mike used to, in Live Without a Net, I think there's a little bit of that in Mike's bass solo too, but the whole song became a feature on that For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour.
That Live Without a Net, I just remember he had the Jim Beam bass and he had some weird synth sounds he was kind of triggering and...
Yeah, heaps of delays and...
Just weird noises for a while, and he was...
Hey, it's a Jim Beam bass. That's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I love Mike Anthony, by the way. Like I said,
so do
he
I.
sounds great on the record, and he's an amazing singer. That whole Van Halen backing vocal thing, that's really him, isn't it?
Yeah, that's again,
Yeah.
that trademark thing, which as much as Wolfgang was a monster player, they kind of missed that a bit live when they came back with Wolf. But what Wolf brought musically, and you could see that interaction, how much Eddie was smiling again on stage.
Yeah.
Like he loved it that him and Alex and Wolf were together on stage, and it didn't even really matter who was singing or how badly, you know.
Well, yeah. But he still did kicks really well.
He turned into this vaudeville act with a spinning cane and a slippery floor, you know.
It is.
Ended up breaking his nose in the...
Interesting guy, David Lee Roth. Yeah.
With a mic stand before Ellen. I don't know if anyone saw that footage.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember seeing it. But he released, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, I probably mentioned this before, he released a bluegrass album of all Van Halen covers, which is the coolest thing ever. Like Bluegrass Jump. Listen to it, people out there. It's cool.
Crazy. All right, so Unchained, in the middle of the song, David Lee Roth makes fun of an executive that just walked into the studio. So he was mid-recording it, and Dave used to do all this ad-lib. It's all in the Ted Templeman book, actually. Okay. And Ted Templeman has produced bands like the Doobie Brothers and like so much. But he said he would have Dave in the studio when they were tracking, just to kind of have that live band vibe. And Dave would just scat and make up weird and wonderful things and talk while Eddie was soloing. He'd just be ad-libbing stuff. But yeah, a record exec in a suit walks in and Dave just starts ad-libbing and he goes, "Hey man, that suit is you." And then it's Ted Templeman.
Oh, that's that spot.
Yeah, and then Ted Templeman's like, "Come on, Dave, give me a break." You know, and that's Ted Templeman in the control room.
That's cool.
So, yeah, like his comments were sometimes added into the mix, like in Everybody Wants Some, all those sorts of things. It was just Dave ad-libbing and the tape was always running and he would decide to use it. So,
cool.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun facts for that record. And I think that, unless you guys have anything to add, that kind of sums up 1981 Van Halen, Fair Warning.
Great record, man. Rob, can I ask you, because you're obviously a big fan, are you Van Hagar, or, I mean, you chose the David Lee Roth era album. Do you buy into the duality that some people have to take on?
Van Sharon.
Van Sharon?
Van Sharon.
I see them as completely different bands. So I love Dave. I love the Dave era stuff for just the complete reckless, abandon, chaotic party nature of it. And I think Dave is more a poet, an educated poet than a singer. So really enjoy...
It's a great way to put it, man.
Yeah, I really enjoy his lyrics. And then I think Eddie became a much better songwriter and a better musician. And the song craft was better with Sammy, and the singing was better, but then the lyrics weren't as engaging. Like it was a little bit more, they fell into that mid-80s kind of lovey-dovey. It was about love and sex and whatever else that Sammy sang about. He didn't get deep all that often. When he did, it was good, like Right Now. Like the lyrically Right Now is great. And I would have loved Sammy to do more of that. And then I'm one of those strange people who I love Van Halen 3 for the same reason I love Fair Warning, because it's Eddie's record. And if you want to hear Eddie stretch out of the boundaries that he held for himself, he really goes out on Van Halen 3. And maybe Gary wasn't the right choice, or they didn't have time to really hone the keys of each song to suit his voice. Right. But in saying that, there's some brilliant moments on that, and it's like Eddie's solo album where he invited a few people to play on it and Gary to sing. And there's a rumor that there was the second record is much better, but it never saw the light of day.
Wow.
So maybe when Wolf gets time and he's ready, we might see some of those songs start to come out, because we have seen in recent times some live shows get released and put onto Spotify that weren't released before. So there is a live record from that 98 tour with Sharon where Gary sings Sammy songs and Dave songs. And I know when I went to see him at the Entertainment Centre, that was the best part, was that that was the only time really, apart from the odd song that Sammy would sing, that you ever got to see Van Halen's whole catalogue performed live, because they had a singer who could sing it all.
Oh, so Sammy Hagar wouldn't do a lot of the old stuff?
No, so he would, they would do Panama and Jump and You Really Got Me. Outside of that, apart from one tour, which I was watching a couple of weeks ago, Sammy did some stuff off of some deep cuts from the Roth era on a particular tour. I think it might have been 88 on the OU81 tour. They did some of the deep cuts that he hadn't ever done on tour before. So that he kind of favoured doing covers, Won't Get Fooled Again and those types of things that they added. And some of his solo stuff would always fit into the set, like One Way to Rock or I Can't Drive 55.
Can't Drive,
So I think it was mainly because they just wanted to move on from it and just make it that Van Hagar era. But long way around is I don't have any favourites. I love it all.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, Rob. Thank you for bringing Fair Warning along.
Absolutely.
Awesome to talk about Eddie, especially this time of year, of course, as we remember his passing. And man, very cool to talk about it on iconic albums.
Long live the king.
Sorry,
yeah, man.
Sorry.
We're still friends, so it's all good.
He hasn't beaten me up yet.
Gabor, where can people check out what you're doing when you're not listening to Van Halen records? When can they check you out?
That doesn't happen very often, but the few times. You can go to YouTube and you can take a very deep breath and type a lot of letters. It's the SuperFunAwesomeHappyTime pedal show. No gaps. We don't do gaps. And you can go and check me out there. We review guitar gear, so pedals, mostly pedals, but amps and guitars and some synthesizer-related stuff every once in a while too. You can go and check that out and follow us and give us thumbs ups and stuff, and that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Very cool. It is a great show. And Rob.
Checks them out.
Man, my main gig as always is Living in the 70s. So just go to facebook.com/Living in the 70s live. Catch all the dates there and all the links. We're just about to announce our summer cruise schedule. And it's not like the Ruby Princess cruise. Okay, we're not doing that. They're just the little river cruises on the Tweed and the Maroochy River. And as things open up, we're hoping to get back into Sydney and Port Macquarie and do those cruises as well.
Fantastic. Rob is the hardest working man in showbiz. And so those...
I'm just happy being a working musician in the business.
That's right.
You need to just, when you walk out on stage, you need to just have a cape and just throw it on the floor. But don't say anything, just do it.
Rob Rhodes!
Oh, James Brown beat me to that.
Rhodes! His name is Rhodes! Rob Rhodes! And that's it.
All right, fellas. See you next week.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, thanks for joining us for another Guitar Speak podcast, Iconic Albums. I've really enjoyed putting these conversations together with Rob and Gabor, and it's been a really cool addition to our podcast show, which every week has deep dive one-on-one interviews as well. That's been our bread and butter for the last 5 years, and that will be continuing as well. Thanks to Fretboard Biology for sponsoring today's episode. Check out the links in the show notes. All right, my name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. And in the words of Michael Schenker, German guitarist from UFO, the Scorpions, and MSG,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.